Hi, my name is Matthew Schwam. I've spent my life putting creative people together with process people and producing product. When we succeed, the product creates iconic results, memorable, lasting impact, connects to the emotional core of a customer base or a public that is very difficult to do. But when you have the right people in place who understand the resources at their disposal, anything is possible. Our space is visual merchandising. We work with retail visual merchandising teams, hospitality visual merchandising teams, and in commercial spaces where there's a need for creativity and unique branding opportunities. The purpose of our program is really to help understand and see a vision for how to take the imagined idea, the one that no one has ever seen before. It's unique to you, it's unique to your brand, it's unique to your life experience. The question is, how do you produce it? And the answer is, you do it with a team, people, process, and then the product. So thinking about how we take the imagination and turn it into a product on a shelf, in a store, in a hotel room, in a space that's relevant to you and the company that you work with is the purpose of our program. When I started my first company, the central goal was to design without limits. We were a design firm. I was the lead designer, had a partner who was also a designer, came from a great background in retail. We wanted to look at space, look at buildings, look at interior spaces, and imagine what was possible in the world, not necessarily what was possible from a catalog. There was a big difference between the thought process of thinking with zero limits versus thinking in a box. And we weren't boxed in people, so we built our entire business on the premise that if we can imagine it, it's possible. In our minds, when a designer wants to create maximum impact with whatever it is that they're doing, they're filtering their creative thought process through the eyes of their customer. The better they know the customer, the more relevant their design will be. The difference between imagining that design and then producing it custom through a manufacturing process versus going to retail, finding an existing closest match, is the return on investment for the customized approach is exponentially greater than the found object, because if it's done right, it relates directly to a specific person that you want to be doing business with. And that's worth its weight in gold, and certainly worth the time and consideration to move forward with branded, customized elements in all your space and material decisions versus found objects. Hi, this is Matthew Schwam, and this is my masterclass. In 2004, I started a company. It was a design business focused on fourth quarter display for holiday. Our customer base included a very diverse mix of commercial office buildings, shopping centers, Fifth Avenue retail flagships in New York, to national and international retailers with hundreds and sometimes over 1,000 locations. Our business was to either go and design the space and manufacture our product against our design, or to work with a retailer on their design and manufacture against their specifications. Before we met with a single customer, we spent over 30 days in China, Taiwan, and Vietnam, meeting with everyone that would see us. We knew that if we had a supplier base that was multifunctional, multidisciplinary, all different kinds of materials, we'd be able to answer any design that either we created or that our customers created. After only 30 days of traveling, meeting, and visiting, we saw a lot in a very small amount of time. We knew what we were looking for. We were very intentional. And in this time period, we developed the ultimate business advantage, which was, as a designer, to be able to design not from inventory, not from a catalog, but from capabilities from various suppliers, various materials, various disciplines. It really opened up the world of design to us. The second big advantage is that we were buying directly from the factories, which meant that we were cutting out 2 and sometimes 5 layers of economic fat, creating real economic advantage to our customers and still putting a fair margin against pricing into our business. The third big advantage was that we developed a base wherever we had factories, we had suppliers, business partners, and our business partners are our boots on the ground. They're in the factories when we're not there. They're there pre-production, during production, post-production, and that's another secret weapon. If I had to narrow it down to 3, those would be the 3 major components one would need to successfully and consistently manufacture overseas. When we're looking at projects, we're always tracing the design and the ultimate goal of the final product vision to the appropriate factory, but before the appropriate factory, it's the appropriate country. We have the advantage of being able to pivot from China to India to Taiwan, Vietnam, Mexico, US. Each of those countries manufactures different product in different ways. And of course, there are redundancies, which is also an advantage that we get to see both sides, but we're also understanding the end goal of our customer so that we can place the product in the right place to begin with. When we're looking at China, we're looking at machine-made product. It's going to be mass-produced. It's going to have a very uniform feel to it. When we're looking at India, we're looking at artisan product. It's a different culture and a different way of manufacturing for the most part. Mostly everything is made by hand. For those reasons, we have this immediate cultural divide. When we look at product, we can purchase glass products from both, metal products, store fixtures, mannequins from both, and so on and so forth. So there's plenty of redundancy in the factory base, but understanding what those products look like based on the different manufacturing processes are important. Between those 2 countries, there's a very wide range of manufacturing capabilities that pretty much cover most of our categories. We'll look at Taiwan for plastic and metal, anything that's injection molded, vacuum formed, acrylic. Taiwan is a very good place to go. Christmas ornaments are made there. In China, there are specific niches that they have, like Christmas trees and Christmas lighting, that India and other places don't. There are redundancies now in Vietnam. Vietnam set up an industrial zone for Chinese factories who wanted to move to Vietnam to serve the US market, primarily due to political reasons. So now there are more options in Vietnam than ever before. In the past, it had been mostly building materials. Today, we manufacture in 7 different countries with over 150 suppliers and 35 international buying partners between buying offices and agencies. It's imperative to have people who really understand the business that we're in so that they can be our eyes and ears. When we're not in the factory, we're all looking for the same exact thing. We're building to specification, but we're also interested in all the finishes, all the nuances, and all of the details, including packaging and safety and making sure the product is going to survive a drop test and survive the freight and logistics it has to endure at a distribution center all the way to delivery. Types of factories we find are those who are producing products that are relative to people who are in the visual merchandising space. It typically involves retail visual merchandising and display clientele in addition to hospitality. So that really puts us in a position where we need materials and processes to respond to anything that anyone can imagine that would be put in a store, not for resale. It encompasses plants and trees, Christmas decorations, lighting, fixtures, mannequins, ceramic for shelves, wood forms, all kinds of things. And sometimes it's a handmade object where it might be a paper flower or something made out of copper sheet in a shape that gets die cut, stamped, and delivered. 25 plus years into this business now. As I mentioned, we're operating in 7 different countries. And one of the reasons why we're in 7 countries is because we like to find comparable factories in different countries so that we can produce prototypes in the beginning of a process from multiple factories. We can see and understand the nuances and differences between a factory in China producing from the same exact specification as a factory in India. The factory in India is going to produce largely by hand, and it's more of an artisan process. The factory in China is going to produce largely by machine, potentially some hand finishing. The processes are completely different to get to the same exact result against the same exact specification. The ability to produce from multiple places, same specification, allows us to address an important topic, which is branding. Every retailer, every hotel, pretty much every business in the world needs to distinguish itself from their competition. So particularly in retail, where a lot of the clothing items are similar, quality levels vary, but the look and feel in each category of apparel, for example, there is quite a bit of redundancy in merchandise. What do they do to distinguish themselves other than produce the best possible product available to them? That's one. But the other is to create environments in store that speaks to their customer and allows their demographic to feel the way they need to feel in order to be comfortable, stay, look, and ultimately do business with them. So we're in a very interesting position. We're serving different stakeholders with different objectives. Our customer, which is our primary stakeholder, their objective is to build to their specification against an approved prototype on time and on budget to meet an in-store deadline. Our suppliers, they're in business to make money, but they also want to serve us. They want to perform for us. Then we have our buying partners who are there to protect our interests, but they also serve as a middleman to help us understand what the factory might be going through and what their challenges are so that we could make level-headed decisions, standing directly in the middle of who we serve and who we support. Relationships create the power in all of these interactions. It is our relationship with our factories because we've been there, we've met them, we've had personal interactions, and it's our long-term buying partners who really understand the nuts and bolts of our business, which is visual merchandising. That combination of niche expertise with people who we've been interacting with for over 25 years has put us in a strong position to effectively get what we want in a very fair and level-handed way on behalf of our customers. To summarize the advantages of our model, there are a few points. One is that we provide an incredible, diverse supplier base so that our customers are in a really strong position to not only compare quality and workmanship, but to compare pricing and timing. All factors are important because the right price with the wrong time is the one that can't meet the deadline. Sometimes we might pay a bit more for a factory who's got a timeline that works with our in-store delivery dates. There are a lot of factors to consider. We look at decision matrix all day long so that we can constantly evaluate where we stand with each supplier in the process. Negotiating is a tricky thing when it comes to timing because when a supplier tells me they need 65 days to produce a product, I know I can push to 60, but pushing below 60, in my experience, is typically a mistake because this supplier has a queue. Unless we're going to do something special like jump the queue, we're usually asking for trouble by pressing. Everybody wants to do business. You don't want to tempt someone to say yes when they've already told you no. We just need to listen carefully and then intelligently negotiate, not negotiate to what we want, but negotiate to what we believe is capable. Another advantage is very simple advantage. It's economic, and we'll beat the market in the US by anywhere from 2 to 5x on any given day on any given product. Aside from just being priced well because we're directly manufacturing and directly importing from the source, we're also in a position to produce custom to the specification. So that just generally doesn't exist in a domestic level because typical manufacturing process is not exactly management. It's usually inventory management, inventory on hand, wherever it was produced. That doesn't matter if it was produced here or somewhere overseas. That inventory was selected by a company. They think the market wants it. And if a brand comes with their own ideas, they have to settle for the closest thing possible. And sometimes that works, particularly when there's no time. And we'll get into that later, the whole conversation about timing. Another couple of points to make is that we're able to mitigate risk based on what's happening in the world. We have leverage to move a project from China to India or India to Vietnam or Vietnam to Taiwan. And we do that all the time based on current events, tariffs, political happenings in that particular place. It could be based on, for example, a civil war or something strange happening that we don't want to be a part of. We might know that there's a port strike happening, so we steer clear in an aware way with risk mitigation. Compliance standards and sustainability, we go through an entire process. We'll get into it later in the program, how we vet a factory, We've been there firsthand. So if a supplier makes it onto our platform, we know they're completely vetted and we won't have any issues with compliance or sustainability issues or social compliance issues, financial compliance issues. It's all been looked at. Of course, things happen unexpected, but we do our homework, and anyone in this business needs to, so that you walk through every door with complete confidence. We describe what we do as end-to-end, which just means that we're in the process from design all the way to delivery. At this point in our careers, we know a lot about logistics. We still work with an expert in that space, which is a freight forwarder. That freight forwarder helps us in every single instance determine the smartest and best and most economical way to transport material from wherever we're manufacturing to wherever we need to deliver. It's not always to the US. Sometimes it's to Europe, sometimes it's to Mexico, but there are always multiple choices that we have at our disposal. Different freight liners offering different timelines, different pricing. It's part of the evaluation. There's a lot of money at stake and it all matters, right? So it's not just the product, it's not just the freight, it's also the distribution, it's also the mode of transportation when we're delivering from a distribution center to a store. Everything matters, and I think that there's a big advantage managing all of that from one business, which is what we do in partnership with our customers. Our customers show up to us with designs in all sorts of ways. In an ideal world, somebody has a physical sample and a specification against the sample, which gives us the dimensions, the weight, the color, the finish, and any nuance conversations around those points. But in the real world, when people are trying to customize a design, it usually starts with a concept. In many cases, there are references, but the exact thing they're looking for doesn't really exist, which, by the way, is what is going to make it special. That's exactly the reason why a director of visual merchandising has a job, and an important one in their organization, because they're able to design relevant product for their brand and product that they believe will speak to their customer. That combination of identifying the look and feel for your brand with tapping into the emotional, spiritual, and economic psyche of your demographic is mission critical. If you don't do it, you'll end up looking just like everyone else. It'd be very hard to distinguish who you are as a company. And there's so many other layers, including advertising and marketing. This is just one piece, but it's important. So typically the first thing we do with this concept is we look at a sketch on a napkin or an inspiration photo with notes or conversation about what they want it to be. And we start thinking immediately about our factory resources and who has the machines and the technology or whatever they need, who has that and where are they? And we are starting to think about the initial conversation we're going to have. But before we do that, once we have a handle on what our customer is aiming at, we turn to our sample library. It's an in-house sample library with materials from all of our suppliers. So we're able to take someone's concept for a glass vase with a chiseled look and feel so that it appears authentic and rustic, and immediately put a glass vase with a chiseled look and feel that looks and feels authentic and rustic in a box and overnight it to say, is this what you're looking for? It's just a conversation starter. It's something tangible to put against an imagined concept so that people can look and say, yeah, this is exactly what I was looking for. Or the opposite, nothing to do with this. This is what I said, but now that I see it, don't like it, let's shift gears. That's how we start. So as soon as we have a handle on what we are looking for, we think about how we're going to communicate this idea to a factory. In most cases, we'll start with a CAD specification. It says, here's exactly what we're looking. Sometimes we still want to feel it out. We might go to a factory and say, we know you have things that are similar. Can you send us samples of everything that you think, similar to the way we provide samples from our library. We're now asking a specific factory to do the same exact thing for us so that we can see not just what we've asked for, but the stuff that we couldn't imagine, that we didn't know existed, that the factory, because they specialize in this space, has already had experience. So we'd like to see what they've done before, hopefully to give us more ideas and help us build the final concept. If the final concept was already built, like I said, we provide a specification and we're ultimately looking for initial prototypes against our final specification, whether it's a combination of samples that they've sent us or something that we've already determined and delivered. So once we have a clear understanding of the design concept, we're also then looking at, in our process with our factory and with our customer, we're looking at functionality. How is it going to be used? Where is it going to be in the store? Are people going to touch it? Does it need to hang? Is there support to hang from? Is it got to plug in? Do we know what the electrical amperage load availability is on a particular outlet? Is the material safe? If it falls, what happens? How does it react? Does it need to be tied down? Does it need to be secured or supported? Or do we need to consider different materials? So as I mentioned earlier, our company spends a lot of time overseas with our partners and with our factories. Our typical trip will involve meeting with existing suppliers and existing business partners, always looking for new resources, which means going to trade shows and visiting specific factories that we've heard about or that we've been introduced to so that we can start the vetting process. The primary concern that we have that attracts us from the get-go, and if it doesn't exist, we have nothing to talk about, is product quality. So the product has to be stellar. It has to separate itself. It has to demonstrate an understanding of the material and the process that's being produced. It needs to be flawless or as near flawless as possible so that we are clear that we're working with the top 1% of the supplier base. We spent the first half of 2025 writing a book about our process. It's called How to Manufacture Overseas, Visual Secrets to Our Success. We've got a lot of valuable information in the book, but I really wanted to read to you the checklist on how we vet a new supplier. So it's a new supplier checklist. Number one, product quality and capability. It's a sample inspection. Are the samples up to our standards? Manufacturing capabilities, capacity. Do they have the capacity to manufacture small, medium, or large jobs? Technical capabilities. What kind of machinery do they have? Do they have skilled labor? Quality control systems. Do they have in-house QC? Or is it third party? Will they allow our QC in as well? Number two, cost and commercial terms. Just the basic competitive nature of the company, their unit price, payment terms, price stability, and any other costs that we should be aware of. And we're comparing that to the market before we get too deeply involved. Number three, compliance and ethics. We look at social compliance, environmental responsibility, and certifications. Reliability and reputation. This is number four. We're looking at their track record. We're calling their references. We're looking at delivery performance, crisis resilience. What kind of redundancies do they have? What kind of plans do they have? What kind of stories can they tell us about how they've dealt with difficult situations? And number five, communication and relationship fit. This is important. It's a real thing. Everyone's got to get along. We're in countries where English is a second language, so there's got to be people there who have command of the language so that we can communicate directly. We like to throw some challenges at these factories during the vetting process to see how they handle problem solving and making adjustments to a typical process. And transparency, willing to talk to us about anything, show us whatever we're looking for, and share information. Number six is logistics and location. We just want to make sure that they're not deep in the woods so that there's access to ports and supplier base and raw materials and that sort of stuff so that the location doesn't get in the way of the efficiency. After we identify a vendor who's producing at the highest possible level in their category, the next step that we take is that we ask for samples. Typically, we will not customize the sample, but we will throw a twist in that creates a mild but meaningful challenge to the supplier. We want to see how they handle it because we know in our business, everything is custom, and ultimately, the supplier is going to need to react and create from a bigger departure from what they're used to doing. So we give something small as an initial test. We don't discuss packaging because we want to understand the supplier's instincts on packaging. Anything that arrives broken, we typically disqualify even if the product is great. That means the sensibility isn't there. We want to know that the supplier, now this is a new supplier that we're vetting, so we want to see that they can deal with our small changes to their existing product, whether it be a special Pantone color or just adding an extra branch to a tree or a layer of branch to a tree. We also need to know that they understand the mission critical part of a drop test and getting material across the world in one piece without damage. So once we receive a sample that arrives to our spec and safely without damage, we start making arrangements to make a factory visit. We don't purchase anything until we do all of this. So now the factory visit, we also want to see how people show up and who shows up. We're looking for not just the contact that we made, but we're looking for ownership to be there, senior management. We want a full tour. We want to see every inch of the factory. In many cases, our factories are massive campuses that may require a full day, so we get all the time we need if the factory has made it to the point where we want to meet. When we make that kind of effort, we'd like to also see that the factory, and typically they do. We're meeting everyone from the shop steward to the owner of the factory. We're seeing everything from the conference room to the machines that are producing the product. In addition to the personal relationships that we're developing and the physical inspection of the premises and understanding of the machines that are being used to produce product, a handle on capacity, a look at their loading docks, a feel for the team, we then look at audits that have been performed on the factory by others. And if we feel a need to implement a new one, we certainly do that on occasion. The audits look at social and financial factors. So the social factor is called a social compliant audit. It is looking at human rights issues. It's looking at making sure that exit signs, that there's a safe workplace, that they're in compliance with fire codes, that there's no child labor, that people are making fair wages, and so on and so on. So after we've done our due diligence, the result is black and white. It's either a pass or a fail. Oftentimes, if it's a fail, it's because there were some specific reasons, and if our partnership feels that those reasons merit a corrective action opportunity for the factory, then we'll provide that. The rule of thumb is that when we need consistency, speed, and mass production, machines usually win. When we need artistry, uniqueness, authenticity, hands typically win. The strongest factories in both categories can also handle the other part. So a strong factory who's effectively a machine factory will also be in a position to put hand finishing touches on at the end to create that authenticity. Whereas a hand factory will often have certain tools at their disposal to machine make parts to make the process more efficient. We start a timeline of milestones, critical milestones from the day we start a project, the concept stage, to the day we finish at the delivery stage. We're typically looking at high-level milestones for all topics where there's a deadline. So there's a deadline to develop the concept, a deadline to produce a product specification, another for product and prototype creation, prototype testing and feedback from stakeholders, design refinement, supplier selection, tooling and mold development if it applies, a pilot run in a store perhaps on shelves for people to see, mass production start time, which is preceded by a purchase order deadline, in-process quality control, final quality control, logistics and shipping, preparation and implementation, product delivery. Managing against all those topics requires a fully informed and collaborative team with everyone being aware that the process is mostly linear, which means that the next step is contingent upon the previous being completed. Meeting those timelines is meaningful so that the process stays intact. The purpose of our time to source calculator is to manage expectations on specific milestone dates, such as the purchase order deadline, the factory production time, and the in-store date. All of these items below the line are fixed It's freight logistics, the time to the port, the wait at the port, the offload, the distribution center, port to the distribution center, distribution services, and so on. So let's just assume here in this example that we want this date, which is the in-store date, to read 2/15. Right now, the purchase order deadline is the same day as today. So let's say that we want to give our team a month and a half. So we're going to type in 11/15, and okay, so we still have time. Now let's say that we know the factory production lead time is 45 days. So let's type that in, and bingo. So there we are. So now this tells us that we have 45 days to arrive in store on February 14th. If this were 60 days and that date was non-negotiable, then this date would change, and we would have a little over a month to get to the purchase order to arrive 2/15. I would encourage everyone to pay attention to the timeline. If your goal is to manufacture elements overseas, customized to your specification, you definitely need time. It varies with every case. Sometimes it's not as much as you think. Sometimes it is longer than you would expect. So planning is really the key. Getting good, accurate milestones and timelines in place early is really the most important part. The designer's role does not end when the design is complete, because the process is end to end, and we all have to be concerned and cognizant of how every action has a reaction, and the entire process is relatively linear and dependent upon the process and piece of the process that happens before it. If the design process decides to take another round of samples, which may cost 2 weeks, what do we do at the end of that process if everything below the production line is fixed time and non-negotiable? That extra 2 weeks could be the difference between shipping between ocean and air. You could be talking about 15% of your total budget. If the budget doesn't change, it means less product. So it serves everyone to work as a team, look at the entire process holistically together, and recognize your role. Even if you're playing that role in the beginning, recognize how your role impacts the end. Another important point about selecting and matching the right supplier with the right project may just have to do with things that are entirely out of their control. We look at, depending on when we're placing the order, when rainy season is or monsoon season, because moisture and excessive rain from those extreme weather events can have an impact on the factory setting. If your material absorbs moisture, it could have an impact. If it's paint that needs to dry and it has a specific dry time that's going to be impacted by the moisture in the air, it needs to be considered. We also look at a busy season for a particular factory. Different factories have different times of year where they may be seasonal or they may have extra orders. We need to be aware so that we can understand the kind of capacity they're going to have to manage our job effectively. The other piece that people sometimes forget to consider are national holidays. So when a factory is quoting 45-day lead time, if it happens to be during Chinese New Year, for example, or Ramadan, we're going to lose days. And we have to make sure that those days that we're going to lose are included in the timeline, or if they need to be added. Before we go into production, we come up with another timeline, an internal timeline with our supplier. And we are looking at every milestone that they need to hit, the date they need to hit to meet their factory exit date. As soon as we write our purchase order, we're discussing in more detail with our suppliers about what we expect, helping them manage their timelines, and being very intentional about all the parts and pieces that are moving on the project. So we have a supplier kickoff meeting to review the purchase order. We talk about payment schedules, the specs of the product, the pricing, the terms and conditions of payment. We're also looking at their purchasing timelines of raw material so that we can have a handle on when things are coming in, when the machines are going to go into motion, the labor that's required to manage those machines. We're looking at a quality control and inspection schedule, setting expectations about when we'll be there, and whatever other needs we might have in order to keep the process moving and keep a handle on the quality control. Might be a little bit granular regarding our in-process quality control checklist. This checklist can be found in the book. I guess I'm plugging it, but I just want you to know where I'm reading it from. How to Manufacture Overseas. It's a book that I wrote about our process. So I'm going to just read through specifically some of our checklist in process quality. Number one, material verification. We confirm raw materials match specifications, the type, the grade, the color, etc. Check material certificates or supplier documents. We inspect for defects or damage upon receipt. And number two, machine setup and calibration. We verify machine settings match production requirements, confirm tools, dies, or molds are clean and in good condition, ensure equipment calibration is up to date. And number three, process parameters. Monitor temperature, pressure, speed of the key process variables. Record readings at regular intervals and adjust the parameters as necessary. Number four, work in progress inspection. WIP. We check the product dimensions using gauges and measuring tools. Inspect surface, finish, color, and texture. Verify assembly steps and sub-process completion. Test functionality if applicable. Number five, defect identification and reporting. Document any deviations and defects that are found. Segregate defective units to prevent further processing. Report issues to production supervisor or quality team immediately. Number six, documentation and traceability. Log the inspection results and measurements. Record operator name and inspection time. Maintain traceability in batches of lots. Number seven, housekeeping and safety. Ensure the work area is clean and free from contamination. Confirm safety protocols are being followed during inspection. That the production is produced to spec without wasting time or material. I want to talk about in-process quality control, IPQC. So the goal is clear. It's to ensure that the product is being made to specification at every step of the way. Things happen. Machines with a tool that dulls over time could potentially start yielding a product with a problem in the middle of the production run. So even though the first 1,000 units came off the line beautiful, the next 1,000 might come off damaged if there's an impact with the tool or even the material. Maybe the next batch of material went into a silo and it had some kind of contamination. That has to be contemplated as a reality of something that might happen. For those reasons, inline quality control is mission critical. We've got to be there on a regular basis, managing everything that's coming off the line. Something that we like to do is we like to take the approved prototype, the one that our customer signs off and says, this is the one, make everyone like this. We put that prototype on the factory floor during production so that everyone can see. There could be 100 people working on a project for us. And who knows, maybe someone's afraid to ask their manager who might have already probably told them what to look for. Maybe they're just too timid to ask again or to confirm or to verify. So for that and other reasons, we like to have the physical sample sitting there so that anyone, whether they want to be verbal about it or not, if they're confused, they can check, they can verify, and stay on track. When performing a drop test, we like to think about it like this. We're going to drop each carton multiple times from waist level on every side, on every edge, and every corner. After that's complete, we're inspecting the physical carton. Are there dents, damages, bumps, or bruises? If there are, we know we need a stronger carton. And then we're going to open the box and we're going to inspect every single product that's inside. If the inner cartons of that box are designed to be reshippable, which we like to do whenever we can, then we're going to drop test each individual box as the second part of this single drop test. Once each individual box is drop tested, same thing, every side, every edge, every corner, then we open each individual box and we take the product out and do a physical inspection of the product. Zero tolerance on damage. If there's any damage, we have to fix. If there's no damage, we have what we need, and we go into production on cartons and inner packs. Container inspections are really important. People might not think about inspecting a container, but they don't all show up in perfect condition, and they need to. So we can reject it, and we have rejected containers because of various reasons. So we're doing the inspection before we start loading a container at our factory. It arrives empty. We have a checklist of items that need to be looked at. It's usually not a problem because the container companies are responsible and they manage against this, but sometimes mistakes happen. So our job is to make sure there were no mistakes. So we're looking at structural integrity. We're looking at the floorboards. We're looking for leaks. we're looking for rotted wood, we're looking for anything that would indicate that either climate or water or structural damage could potentially damage or impact our delivery and our product. If we find it, we can fix it or reject it and take another container. To summarize packaging as brand expression, the package is certainly a functional vessel to move product, but we utilize it as a communication tool and even as a marketing and a branding tool. The communication that we provide on that packaging is just as important in some cases as the product itself, because the product may not get to where it's going in the hands that it belongs to without great communication on the outside of the carton, which is what's informing everyone in the process. We like to make the carton look beautiful and relevant to the brand, which would include brand expression, including logos and seasonal graphics. The way Amazon or the Company Guild, they have very distinctive packaging that lets you know exactly what's in the box and who it's from when it arrives. So among the other cartons that are sitting on the stoop or on the loading dock or wherever it is, you could easily identify based on the branded imagery and copy. For clarity in a very practical way, for a third-party logistical warehouse to receive cartons, properly label them, and know that they're doing that with extreme accuracy, the cartons play a critical role for them as well. Packaging team designs, develops, and oversees every aspect of product packaging before shipping to customers. The primary mission of the packaging team is to ensure products arrive safely, are easy to handle, and require minimal effort to install and store. This means cartons are engineered to be secure, appropriately sized, lightweight, and installation ready, so products transition seamlessly from the box to the display with speed and reliability. Container has a capacity. It's the cubic measurement of how much space is available inside the container. There's square footage, and then there's the cube, which also includes the air space from the floor to the ceiling and the width. So it will indicate how many cartons will actually fit in that container, which has a direct impact on the price per carton, which ultimately has an impact on the price per unit, which is inside the carton. So we need to understand how many units we can get on a container, the cost implication, and how to design our cartons in the most effective way to maximize the capacity. One of our most valued relationships is with our freight forwarder. Our freight forwarder, as you would imagine, is helping us and guiding us toward the most economical solution to moving freight from point A to point B, and then from point B to point C, even from point C to point D. It starts with the exit factory date and the freight forwarder's ability to find us the right vessel on the right date with the right cutoff so that we can time and coordinate the delivery of a stuffed container from the factory to the port before the date, the cutoff date at the port, and then to meet the vessel deadline, meet that container on the other side, clear customs, pay taxes and duties, everything else that needs to happen, and pick the container up. Then that container needs to be delivered to a distribution center. Oftentimes, we then come back to the distribution center and make a final delivery. Typically, from the distribution center, it's a local freight carrier who's making that final delivery. The freight forwarder is also working with U.S. Customs to make sure that all documentation is properly prepared in a timely manner. Customs needs the process to be followed. The documentation that they're looking for is a bill of lading, a commercial invoice, packing list, arrival notice, customs bond, entry manifest, and a customs entry summary. When importing anything to do with wildlife skins or feathers or materials that have the potential to be infested by insects, there are other forms that need to be contemplated, or even import permits that need to be obtained in order to bring that product in. So another third-party partner that's very important to our company is our 3PL partners. We have multiple 3PL partners. It stands for third-party logistics. It's typically the company that has big warehouses in the ports that we deliver to, where we could deliver to a port, move the container with our freight forwarder to the 3PL distribution center, where they will then unpack the container, label it properly, open up boxes if there's a pick and pack involved. Pick and pack, by the way, is when, products from different cartons are being repacked into one carton. One example. So if there's one key takeaway that I'd like you to have, it is this. Designers can design well beyond their imagination and well beyond their original thought process when they're engaged in understanding the manufacturing process. It is the process that reveals all of the unrealized opportunities. It's sometimes linear, sometimes it all happens at once. It could be someone in a factory with a great idea. It could be a buying office who's done it before, who has something to offer. But it almost always happens. Managing to that sort of X factor where there's just something about it that is so special, can't put our finger on it, that's always where we want to be. The only opportunity we have is to go through the process and to run that process properly.